Three families sat in three separate rows of the Bellwether County Courthouse. They did not sit together. Their grief was too different. One family had lost a father. Another had buried a daughter. The third had spent months being told that what happened was an unfortunate medical complication before investigators proved it was part of something larger. Across the aisle sat Evelyn Hart, the woman who survived. She carried damage that would follow her for the rest of her life. At the defense table was Lena Voss, the rural pharmacist many people in eastern Kentucky had once trusted more than their own doctors. She had filled prescriptions after closing time, covered costs for families without insurance, and remembered which elderly patients needed someone to call during winter storms. Now prosecutors said she had done something far darker. Lena had decided that some patients were honest and others manipulative. Some were disciplined, others were weak. Some deserved help immediately. Others, in her judgment, needed to be delayed or taught a lesson. 3 people died after decisions she knew were no longer purely professional. A fourth survived with permanent consequences. And when the first death threatened to expose her, Lena tried to place the blame on a young employee who had once seen her as a mentor. The woman in the white coat had appointed herself the judge of who was worthy of relief. But 26 years earlier, Lena had stood on the other side of that judgment. She was 13, leaning across a hospital reception desk, trying to explain that her mother was not pretending. Mary Ann Voss was frightened and asking for help. The adults saw the history in her file and decided they already understood what kind of woman she was. Dangerous. Manipulative. Beyond help. By morning, Lena's mother was dead. That night did not make Lena innocent of what she would later do. Pain can explain the shape of a wound, but it cannot excuse the moment a wounded person chooses to cut someone else. Still, the question remained. How did a girl who once begged strangers to believe her mother grow into a woman who decided that other mothers, fathers, and daughters were not worthy of being believed? To understand that, the story must return to the night Lena learned that in Bellwether County, mercy was never given freely. It was granted by whoever stood behind the counter. By the time the judge entered the courtroom, Lena Voss had already learned not to look toward the families. She kept her eyes on the polished edge of the defense table. There were no pharmacy shelves in front of her now. No white coat. No line of patients waiting for her approval. Only legal pads, evidence binders, and the quiet sound of people breathing through grief. The prosecutor did not describe Lena as reckless. Recklessness suggested a moment without thought. He described a sequence. A warning received. A conflict recognized. An opportunity to step aside. A decision to remain in control. Then another decision, made after the first consequence had already shown her what that control could cost. The judge repeated the distinction. This was not one misunderstanding at a crowded counter. Lena had been told that her decisions were no longer neutral. She had been offered a way to leave the pharmacy without losing everything. She had been asked to let another professional take over. She refused. When the first family lost someone, Lena did not come forward. She changed the story inside the store. When a young technician began asking questions, Lena allowed suspicion to settle over her instead. That technician, Kira Bell, sat near the back of the courtroom. Years earlier, Kira had copied the way Lena folded her sleeves before a shift. She had watched Lena explain insurance denials to frightened patients and believed that competence could also be kindness. Now she looked toward the witness stand, not the woman who had once taught her. Ruth Delaney sat closer to the families. She had given Lena her first pharmacy job, helped pay for books, and later sold her a share of the business for less than it was worth. In court, Ruth did not look angry. She looked tired. Daniel Mercer was not there. The empty place where Lena expected her husband to sit became the only part of the room she could not stop noticing. The court saw a licensed professional who had used trust as authority and authority as permission. Bellwether County saw the woman who had served its rural families for years and quietly decided that some people deserved immediate help while others needed to prove themselves first. Lena heard another word beneath every accusation. Dangerous. It was not new to her. Long before anyone used that word for Lena, adults had used it for her mother. 26 years earlier, Bellwether County was already a place built around things that had stopped working. The mines had closed. Storefronts along the main road had gone dark. Families measured distance not in miles, but in how much gasoline they could afford. Medical care existed, but rarely close enough, fast enough, or cheaply enough. The Voss family rented a narrow house halfway up a muddy hill outside town. The porch leaned toward the road. In winter, Lena pushed towels into the window frames to keep out the cold. Her mother, Mary Ann, had once worked long shifts at a food packaging plant. After an injury, she returned home with medication, reduced hours, and the promise that she would be back to normal soon. At first, Lena believed her. Mary Ann still cooked. She sang old country songs while washing dishes. She checked Lena's homework and reminded Caleb to bring his coat. Then the bills began gathering beneath a ceramic bowl on the kitchen table. Mary Ann missed work. She forgot promises. Some evenings she spoke too quickly. On others, she stayed in her bedroom with the curtains closed. Lena was 13 when she began taking over the small duties that kept the household from becoming visible to outsiders. She counted grocery money. She signed school forms for Caleb when Mary Ann forgot. When a teacher asked whether everything was all right at home, Lena smiled and said her mother was recovering. It was a lie. She knew the teacher was offering help. She also knew what help might mean: social workers, questions, strangers entering their house, perhaps someone deciding Mary Ann could no longer keep her children, so Lena protected the family by hiding it. At 13, she could not know that concealment would become one of the most durable habits of her life. She only knew that weakness attracted attention, and attention could take away whatever was left. Then came the night Mary Ann finally admitted she was afraid, not of losing her job, not of the unpaid bills, of herself. She asked Lena to help her find someone who would believe she wanted to stop. That request became the dividing line in Lena's life. Everything before the night her mother asked to be saved, and everything that came after the adults, decided what kind of woman Mary Ann already was. Mary Ann Voss had not always been a woman people spoke about in lowered voices. Before the injury, she was the kind of mother who could stretch one package of chicken across 3 dinners and still make her children feel as if nothing was missing. On summer evenings, she opened every window in the house and sang along with the radio while Lena dried the dishes. That was the version of Mary Ann Lena tried to preserve. The other version arrived slowly. It began with the accident at the packaging plant. Mary Ann damaged her back badly enough that standing for an entire shift became almost impossible. The company reduced her hours. Then it stopped scheduling her. The medication helped at first. It let her sleep and move around the kitchen without bracing herself against the counter. It let her believe the old life was still waiting. But relief became something she organized her days around. Mary Ann started checking the bottle before checking the refrigerator. Some afternoons she was warm and talkative. Others, she snapped at Caleb for making noise and later cried because she could not remember what she had said. Lena learned to tell what kind of evening it would be from the way Mary Ann closed the front door. No one appointed her the adult in the house. The role simply moved toward her until she stopped noticing its weight. She made sure Caleb ate. She kept the electricity notices hidden from him. She learned which excuses sounded believable when the school asked why Mary Ann had missed another meeting. Still, there were moments when the old Mary Ann returned. She would sit at the edge of Lena's bed and apologize. She promised the next week would be different. She said the pain had made her confused. Lena wanted to believe every promise. She also began to resent needing them. That resentment frightened her. A good daughter was supposed to feel sympathy. Lena often felt anger first. She hated the medicine, the plant that had discarded Mary Ann, and the clinic that kept changing what it would cover. Most of all, she hated herself for wondering whether life might become easier if her mother disappeared. The thought lasted seconds. The guilt lasted years. On the final night, Mary Ann sat at the kitchen table with both hands around a glass of water and admitted she could no longer trust herself to solve the problem alone. "I need somebody to help me stop," she said. Lena had been waiting for those words, without knowing it. She woke Caleb and left him with a neighbor. Then she helped Mary Ann put on a coat. Because the family car no longer ran, they walked down the hill until a neighbor agreed to drive them to a small medical facility outside town. By the time they arrived, Lena had already built the ending in her mind. An adult would listen. Someone would see that Mary Ann had come voluntarily. They would explain what happened next. Her mother would eventually come home steadier and grateful that Lena had not given up. Instead, the first questions were about Mary Ann's history. A staff member looked at the file before Mary Ann had finished explaining why she was there. Had she missed previous appointments? Yes. Had she requested medication early? Once. Marianne said. Maybe twice. Had she followed the last plan exactly? No. The answers gathered around her like evidence of character rather than signs of a person losing control. Lena interrupted. Her mother was not asking for more medication, she said. Marianne was afraid and wanted treatment. The adults did not shout. They spoke in professional, exhausted voices. They explained that the facility had limits. They mentioned another office, another assessment, another time to return. Someone used the word non-compliant. Someone else said Marianne had to demonstrate that she was ready to participate. Marianne stopped arguing. Her shoulders lowered. She began nodding before people finished speaking. She thanked them as though she had come to the wrong building. Outside, Lena demanded that they go somewhere else. Marianne said she was tired. Lena accused her of giving up. She said this was what always happened. Marianne waited until everything became impossible, then expected someone else to repair it. Her mother did not answer. For years, Lena remembered that silence as proof that she had been right. Much later, she would understand it may have been shame. They returned home before dawn. What followed was recorded in official language that made the morning seem ordinary. A call, an arrival, a time, a declaration. Lena remembered none of it in that order. She remembered Caleb standing barefoot in the hallway. She remembered a neighbor pulling him into another room. She remembered the glass of water still on the kitchen table. Marianne was dead. The county did not examine why a woman asking for help had returned home without it. No one explained addiction, grief, or institutional failure to Lena and Caleb. Adults offered simpler conclusions. Marianne had been sick. Marianne had made bad choices. Marianne had been difficult to help. Each statement held part of the truth. Together, they allowed everyone else to move on. At first, Lena blamed the facility, the plant, and her absent father. Her anger moved from one target to another because none gave her the explanation she needed. A version in which the death could have been prevented by someone strong enough to act correctly. Eventually, she placed that responsibility on Marianne. It was cruel, but it made the world feel orderly. If her mother had told the truth earlier, kept every appointment, and shown enough discipline, perhaps the adults would have believed her. This conclusion protected Lena from a more frightening possibility, that someone could finally ask for help and still be refused because everyone had already decided what the request meant. At the funeral, Marianne's sister, June, offered to take Lena and Caleb to Lexington. She promised a better school, separate rooms, and counseling. Caleb wanted to go. Lena refused. She said Bellwether County was home. She said changing schools could cost her the academic record she had built. She said Caleb needed stability. Some of that was true. The deeper truth was that Lena did not want strangers asking her to discuss the night. She feared that if grief became complicated, the rules she had created would collapse. June told her that needing help did not make her weak. Lena heard only the word weak. She stayed to complete the school year. Caleb went with June. They promised to call, but the distance between them quickly became more than miles. Lena told herself she had chosen the responsible path. In reality, she had made the first decision that would define much of her life. When love became painful, she reduced it to a judgment. Marianne had been weak. Caleb was unstable. June was sentimental. Lena would survive because she would never be any of those things. She did not yet imagine a pharmacy, a license, or a town waiting for her decisions. She only knew she never again wanted another person's judgment to determine whether her family mattered. One day, she would become the person whose answer could not be ignored. For the first weeks after Caleb left with Aunt June, Lena moved through the rented house as if nothing permanent had happened. She attended school, washed her clothes in the sink when the machine failed, and studied at the kitchen table beneath a light that flickered. The rooms were quieter without Caleb. At first, Lena called the quiet useful. No arguments, no calls from school, no one asking questions about Marianne. Then, she began noticing what he had left behind: a cracked baseball glove, comic books held together with a rubber band, a chipped cereal bowl hidden in a cabinet. Lena packed everything into one box and pushed it into the closet. She did not throw it away. She also never sent it to him. At school, Marianne's death did not remain private. Bellwether County was too small for that. Adults lowered their voices when Lena passed. Students were less careful. One girl asked whether Marianne had died because she had taken too much. A boy in chemistry called Lena the addict's daughter and laughed. Lena did not cry or leave the room. She answered the next question before anyone else could. That became her method. She could not control what people knew, but she could make herself harder to reduce to it. She became the student who never missed an assignment, never arrived unprepared, and never gave a teacher reason to wonder whether trouble at home had followed her into class. Her grades improved. So did the distance between her and everyone around her. The school counselor, Mrs. Weller, asked Lena to visit once a week. She explained that grief could appear as anger, exhaustion, or the need to control small things. Lena said she was sleeping well. Mrs. Weller asked whether she had spoken with Caleb. Lena said they called often. Neither answer was true. The counselor assured her that a scholarship committee would not punish her for needing support. Lena heard only that support and weakness had already been connected in someone else's mind. She stopped attending. By 17, Lena's discipline had become the quality adults admired most. Teachers described her as resilient. Neighbors said Marianne would have been proud. People who had barely spoken to the family now praised Lena for rising above her circumstances. The praise carried a condition. They admired her because she did not resemble the part of Marianne they remembered. Lena understood the bargain. She avoided parties, worked evenings at a grocery store, and kept her notebooks spotless. When the heating bill went unpaid, she studied at the library rather than tell anyone the house was cold. She began applying for health science scholarships. Pharmacy appealed to her because it seemed to place order between suffering and relief. There were records, rules, and trained people who knew what should happen next. It looked like a world where mistakes could be prevented if someone paid enough attention. Caleb returned during Lena's final year of high school. He was 16, taller than she remembered, and angry in a way that made every room feel smaller. Life with Aunt June had given him stability but had not removed his grief. He had begun skipping school and had been suspended after a fight. June asked Lena to speak with him. For 3 days, brother and sister lived under the same roof. Caleb tried to joke about the old house. Lena asked whether he had completed his assignments. He wanted to talk about Marianne. Lena wanted to talk about his future. The argument came on the 3rd night. Caleb said Lena had turned their mother into a warning about what not to become. He accused her of acting as though good grades made her the only person in the family who had suffered correctly. Lena told him grief was not an excuse to destroy every opportunity Aunt June had given him. Caleb asked whether she had ever missed him. Lena did not answer quickly enough. He left the next morning. Months later, Caleb was detained after riding with 2 older boys who had taken property from a closed repair shop. His role was minor, and June said he could probably be released to a responsible adult. Lena had access to a car through her manager. She could have gone. That afternoon, she was scheduled to meet a regional scholarship committee. June called twice. On the second call, Lena stood in the grocery store room wearing the only formal blouse she owned. She imagined being seen beside Caleb. She imagined someone connecting his name to Marianne and then to her. Lena said she could not leave work. This was no longer the lie of a frightened 13-year-old trying to keep strangers outside her home. She knew what she was protecting. Her image. June drove through the night to collect Caleb. He did not call Lena again. The scholarship interview went well. Samuel Pike, a retired teacher on the committee, noticed how carefully Lena spoke about rural health care. He wrote an additional letter describing her as someone who understood what happened when isolated families could not reach reliable support. Lena received enough funding to begin a pre-pharmacy program at a community college. The day the letter arrived, she read it 3 times on the porch. She had achieved what she believed survival was supposed to look like. Still, she could not forget June's unanswered calls. Regret did not make her contact Caleb. She turned it into another rule. Attachments became dangerous when they asked her to risk the future she had built. At college, Lena said her mother had died from a sudden illness. She said she was an only child. The story became easier each time. During her 2nd year, Lena applied for weekend work at Delaney Pharmacy, a narrow independent store owned by Ruth Delaney. Ruth was practical, direct, and unimpressed by polished answers. During the interview, she asked why Lena wanted to become a pharmacist. Lena gave her prepared answer about serving rural communities. Ruth listened, then asked, who was sick? Lena could have said Marianne's name. Instead, she said her mother had suffered from an illness no one caught in time. It was not entirely false. That made it easier to defend. Ruth hired her. She taught Lena how to speak to elderly patients without rushing them, how to challenge an insurance denial without making the person at the counter feel like a burden, and how to admit uncertainty before it became an error. Ruth also helped without demanding a performance of gratitude. When tuition increased, she added hours to Lena's schedule. When Lena's car failed, Ruth lent her an old sedan. Lena accepted the practical help. She kept the rest of herself sealed. Then a letter arrived from Caleb. He wrote that he was leaving Kentucky. He did not blame Lena for Marianne's death or for his own mistakes. He blamed her for treating him as evidence of a life she wanted erased. "I hope becoming somebody is worth pretending we were nobody," he wrote. Lena folded the letter and placed it inside a textbook. She did not respond. The next morning, she arrived at Delaney Pharmacy early and worked harder than anyone had asked. Ruth saw discipline. Lena felt escape. Neither yet understood that Lena was learning to survive by removing people whenever their pain threatened the version of herself she needed to protect. When Lena returned to Bellwether County with a pharmacy degree, the town treated her success as proof that escape could sometimes lead back home. Delaney Pharmacy stood on Main Street between a hardware store and a diner that opened before sunrise. The building was narrow, with uneven floors and shelves Ruth Delaney repaired instead of replacing. People came because the nearest chain pharmacy was nearly 40 miles away and because Ruth still answered the phone after closing. Lena learned the rhythm quickly. She knew which patients could not drive after dark, who struggled to read insurance letters, and who pretended to understand because they were embarrassed. During winter storms, she called older customers before the roads became impassable. When a claim was denied, she stayed on hold until someone explained why. Her competence was not an act. She cared. Samuel Pike, the retired teacher who had supported her scholarship application, became a regular customer. He teased her about speaking too quickly and brought tomatoes from his garden each summer. Lena never charged him for deliveries. Ruth watched her with pride. Bellwether County had expected Lena to leave and forget the place. Instead, she returned with the knowledge to make it less isolated. For several years, the work gave Lena something achievement alone never had: usefulness without shame. At the pharmacy, people did not ask about Marianne. They asked whether Lena could explain a letter or contact a doctor. Their gratitude seemed connected to what she did, not to how well she had hidden where she came from. Daniel Mercer met her through a school health program. He was a counselor at the county high school and helped organize an evening for parents confused about prescriptions, insurance, and mental health referrals. Daniel noticed Lena staying late to explain the same form to a grandmother for the third time. Lena noticed that he never described struggling families as irresponsible. Their relationship developed slowly. Daniel did not press when Lena changed the subject whenever childhood came up. He assumed she would speak when she was ready. They married in a small ceremony behind Ruth's house. For a while, Lena lived the life she had once believed belonged to other people. She had a husband who trusted her, a profession with clear rules, and a home where no one hid unpaid bills beneath a bowl. Still, control remained the way she understood safety. She checked the locks twice each night and organized expenses months ahead. When Daniel forgot an appointment, Lena reacted as though forgetfulness were the first step toward collapse. He sometimes told her that a mistake was not a moral failure. Lena agreed in theory. At work, she was known for helping patients who had been turned away elsewhere. One was Travis Cole, a former construction worker with a history of injury and dependence on pain medication. Travis arrived ashamed and defensive. His insurance had changed, and parts of his treatment plan were unresolved. Lena spent hours contacting offices and helping him understand what he needed to do next. He thanked her with tears in his eyes. For months, Travis seemed steadier. He found part-time work and spoke about repairing his relationship with his daughter. His progress became personal to Lena. She held it up as evidence that firmness, attention, and the right kind of help could pull someone back. Then the inconsistencies began. Travis missed appointments. He gave explanations that did not match what other offices had recorded. He asked Lena to overlook small irregularities because she knew how hard he had worked. Lena wanted to believe him. She also needed the story of his recovery to remain true because it confirmed that she could succeed where the adults around Marianne had failed. When Ruth advised her to step back and let Travis's medical team handle the situation, Lena refused. She said abandoning him would prove he had no reason to be honest. In reality, Lena had begun measuring his progress as a reflection of her own judgment. The confrontation came near closing time. Travis demanded that Lena fix a problem she did not have the authority to erase. When she would not, he accused her of enjoying the power to make desperate people beg. He said she did not care whether he recovered. She only cared about being able to say she had saved him. The accusation struck deeper than his anger. For the rest of the evening, Lena replayed every hour she had spent helping him. Her generosity began to feel like evidence used against her. Travis later apologized. He admitted he had lied and returned to treatment through another provider. The event should have remained what it was: one patient's relapse, one breach of trust, and one lesson about professional boundaries. Instead, Lena turned it into a rule about people. She began watching how patients spoke before deciding how much effort to give them. Gratitude reassured her. Frustration made her suspicious. A missed appointment suggested character. A raised voice became evidence of manipulation. She created a private notebook with no official place in the pharmacy. Beside patient initials, she wrote phrases such as "changes story," "pressures staff," or "expects exceptions." She called them reminders, not judgments. Ruth found the notebook one evening. She did not accuse Lena of cruelty. She said experience could help a pharmacist notice patterns, but personal impressions could never replace policy, documentation, or another professional's evaluation. "You do not have to believe every word someone says," Ruth told her. "You still have to give them the same process." Lena heard the warning. She also heard what she believed Ruth was too kind to admit. Some patients knew how to use sympathy. Lena agreed to stop writing the notes. She moved them to a locked drawer instead. That choice was small compared with what came later. No one died because of it. No family was destroyed, but it marked the first time Lena knowingly placed a private moral system beside the professional one Ruth had taught her. The community rewarded the change before it understood it. At a county meeting about medication misuse, a sheriff's deputy praised Lena for saying no when others feared confrontation. A local newspaper called her one of the region's strongest voices for accountability. Families exhausted by addiction, said Bellwether County, needed someone who could not be manipulated. Lena began to believe suspicion was not a wound she needed to manage. It was a strength the town had learned to value. Ruth saw a woman becoming harder. Daniel saw a woman coming home later and speaking about patients as if their worst day revealed their entire character. Lena saw proof that kindness only mattered when someone strong controlled its limits. Ruth Delaney did not retire all at once. She gave away pieces of the pharmacy slowly, as if testing whether the place could keep its character after her hands were no longer on everything. First, Lena took over insurance appeals, then scheduling. Later, Ruth transferred a small ownership share and allowed Lena's name to appear beside hers on the business papers. The arrangement should have made Lena feel secure. Instead, each new responsibility made the possibility of losing the pharmacy more frightening. Delaney Pharmacy was no longer only a workplace. It was the first place where Lena's history had seemed useful rather than shameful. Every patient who asked for her by name confirmed that she had become someone different from the frightened girl in the Voss house. The county's needs grew around that feeling. A clinic closed 2 towns away. A regional bus route was reduced. More elderly patients depended on relatives or neighbors to collect medications. Ruth and Lena began coordinating deliveries and helping families apply for assistance programs. During that period, Lena still showed real patience. Evelyn Hart, a widowed seamstress with several chronic health problems, often arrived carrying envelopes she did not understand. Lena spread the papers across the consultation table and explained them one at a time. Evelyn apologized whenever the process took too long. "You came here for help," Lena told her. "You do not have to apologize for the time it requires." The words were sincere. Outside the pharmacy, Lena and Daniel had begun discussing a family. Daniel wanted children but never treated parenthood as a test Lena had to pass. When Lena said pregnancy frightened her, he suggested adoption. When she worried that a child might carry needs they could not predict, he said no family arrived with guarantees. Lena kept postponing the conversation. She said the pharmacy was expanding, Ruth's health was less reliable, and the county needed the new assistance program to work. Those reasons were real. They also protected Lena from a deeper fear. A child could not be managed like a budget. A child might become angry, ill, dependent, or difficult. Love would require Lena to remain present when competence did not solve the problem. At work, Ruth noticed another warning. Lena had stopped delegating. She reviewed Kirabel's work after hours, even when no mistake had occurred. She rechecked orders completed by experienced staff. She kept the keys to every locked cabinet and resisted giving Ruth access to the private notes she claimed were only reminders. When Ruth asked why, Lena said standards had to remain consistent. Ruth replied that consistency was not the same as making every decision alone. The disagreement remained quiet until Bellwether County announced a medication access program for residents in remote areas. The program would bring public funding, additional staff, and authority to coordinate with local clinics. Ruth believed the pharmacy should participate. She did not believe Lena should direct it alone. At a meeting after closing, Ruth told Lena she looked exhausted. Daniel had already called once to ask whether Lena had been sleeping at the store. Ruth proposed a month away. A relief pharmacist would manage daily decisions. Lena would remain an owner and continue receiving income. Nothing would be announced beyond a planned leave. Daniel could take her somewhere outside Bellwether County, where no one needed an answer from her. For several seconds, Lena felt relief before she felt insulted. The relief frightened her more. It suggested Ruth had seen something Lena worked hard to hide. She was tired enough to make mistakes, and angry enough to resent anyone who noticed. Lena asked whether Ruth planned to take the business back. Ruth said the pharmacy was not a prize to be won or lost. It was a responsibility that sometimes required stepping away. Daniel supported the plan. He reserved a cabin in Tennessee and said they could spend the month deciding what they wanted their marriage to become, not only what the pharmacy required. For one evening, Lena allowed herself to imagine it. No phone beside the bed. No line forming before the doors opened. No one asking her to decide whether a problem was urgent, legitimate, or someone else's fault. She told Ruth she would take the leave. 3 days later, the county administrator called. The board wanted Lena to lead the new access program. Her reputation for discipline had impressed them. They said the initiative needed someone who would not allow public funds to be misused. The offer gave Lena exactly what rest could not: recognition. It also placed the county's most vulnerable patients inside a system she would help control. Lena did not tell the administrator she had agreed to step away. She accepted the position and canceled the relief pharmacist before speaking to Ruth. When Daniel discovered the cabin reservation had been removed, Lena said the county had created an emergency. He asked whether hundreds of patients truly depended on her beginning that month. Lena said they might. "Do they need you?" Daniel asked. "Or do you need them to?" Lena became angry because she did not have an answer that felt safe. She accused Daniel of resenting her success. She reminded him that other counselors could cover his absence. The pharmacy, she said, had no second Lena Voss. Ruth reacted more quietly. She told Lena that leadership accepted limits. Power denied them. Lena replied that Ruth had built the pharmacy in a different time. Kindness without oversight, she said, had already cost too many families. Ruth could have stopped the ownership transfer. Instead, she chose one final act of trust. She completed the next stage of the sale while adding a requirement that major clinical disputes be reviewed by another professional. Ruth hoped responsibility would steady Lena. Lena interpreted the transfer as confirmation that Ruth finally accepted who was strong enough to lead. The assistance program launched that fall. Newspaper photographs showed Lena beside county officials, holding a folder marked with the rural districts the pharmacy would serve. Evelyn Hart clipped the article and brought it to the store. "Your mother would be proud," she said. Lena thanked her without explaining that praise involving Mary Ann still felt like pressure against a sealed door. That night, she placed the article inside the same locked drawer as her private notes. The month away had been a real exit. Daniel had offered a life in which Lena could be loved even when she was not useful. Ruth had offered a profession that could survive without her constant control. Lena understood both offers. She rejected them because being needed felt safer than being known. For the first time, she deliberately chose more authority after the people closest to her warned that authority was changing her. The door back remained open. Lena turned away from it before anyone had forced her through. The records arrived in 6 gray boxes from a clinic that had closed 2 years earlier. Bellwether County had asked Delaney Pharmacy to help identify documents connected to the new Rural Access Program. Most were ordinary: expired contracts, training manuals, lists of providers who had moved away. Near the bottom of the 4th box, Ruth found a folder with a name she recognized from Lena's hiring interview: Marianne Voss. Ruth carried it to Lena's office and offered to stay while she opened it. Lena said no. Inside was not a clean story of innocence. Marianne had missed appointments, failed to follow parts of a treatment plan, and given inconsistent explanations. Lena expected those details. They were the facts she had used for years to keep her mother contained inside one conclusion. Then she reached the later pages. Marianne had requested treatment voluntarily. She had agreed to monitoring and asked whether there was a program that would let her continue caring for her children. A counselor described her as frightened but motivated. Another entry showed that one option had been denied because her insurance would not cover it. A referral had been made elsewhere, but the waiting period was several weeks. The final note was harder to read. Marianne had called again. She said she was afraid she would not make it to the appointment and asked to be reassessed sooner. The request had been marked non-urgent because of her previous history. Nothing in the file erased Marianne's responsibility. She had lied, broken promises, and caused Caleb and Lena real harm. But she had also tried to return. The truth was neither the simple rescue Lena had imagined as a child, nor the simple failure she had accepted as an adult. Marianne had been accountable and abandoned at the same time. For years, Lena had believed rules made the world orderly. If someone told the truth, followed instructions, and accepted discipline, help would arrive. Marianne's file proved that a person could begin doing those things too late for others to see anything except who she had been before. It also forced Lena to consider how many patients she had judged through the same kind of history. Ruth knocked and asked whether Lena wanted to talk. Lena slid the file into her desk and said there was nothing important in it. Unlike the evasions of her childhood, this concealment came from an adult who understood both the professional stakes and the moral meaning of what she was hiding. If Ruth read it, she might connect Marianne's experience to the private standards Lena had begun applying to patients. Daniel might ask why Lena had hidden the truth for so long. The county might question whether her judgment was shaped by a wound she had never examined. Lena told herself the documents were old. No one could help Marianne now. Reopening the past would only damage the work Lena was doing for people who were still alive. She placed the folder inside the locked drawer beneath the newspaper article and her private notebook. That evening, she opened it again and found a handwritten line on an intake form. Patient states she does not want her children to remember her only this way. For a moment, Lena felt something close to forgiveness. Then came anger. Why had Marianne not said those words at home? Why had Lena been forced to become responsible before anyone admitted how bad things were? Those questions let Lena move the burden back where she needed it. The system had failed, but Marianne had failed first. 2 weeks later, Caleb returned to Bellwether County. Aunt June had suffered a stroke, and Caleb was helping move her into assisted living. He stopped at the pharmacy because June had told him Ruth still worked there. Caleb was older, with gray beginning at his temples. The anger he carried as a teenager had settled into caution. The reunion remained polite until he asked whether Lena had received his letter years earlier. She said she had. He nodded, then mentioned Marianne's calls. June, he explained, had once spoken with a counselor from the old clinic. She knew Marianne had sought treatment before the final night. June had wanted to tell Lena, but Lena refused every conversation that made their mother more complicated. Lena said Caleb did not know what he was talking about. He asked whether that was true or merely the answer she had practiced. Lena reminded him that she had stayed, finished school, paid the remaining bills, and built something useful in the town they had both wanted to escape. Caleb said survival did not give her ownership of the past. He did not excuse Marianne. He spoke about the fear she caused, the promises she broke, and the damage that remained. Then, he said, she still tried to come back. The sentence matched the note in the file too closely. Lena accused him of turning their mother into a victim because it was easier than accepting his own mistakes. Caleb did not argue. He said both things could be true. Marianne had harmed them. People had also failed her. That was the balance Lena could not tolerate. If Marianne could be guilty and still worthy of compassion, then the categories Lena relied on were false. A difficult patient could also be telling the truth. Someone who had wasted earlier chances could still deserve another one. Caleb asked Lena to come with him to June's apartment. There were old letters they could review together. He did not ask her to forgive Marianne. He asked her to stop reducing their mother to the worst thing she had become. It was another door back. Lena closed it. She told Caleb to leave the pharmacy and not return without an appointment. He looked at the patients waiting and the employees watching from a distance. Then he understood that Lena no longer needed to be right only about Marianne. She needed everyone around her to accept that her judgment carried more weight than theirs. After he left, Ruth asked what had happened. Lena said her brother had always been unstable and had come looking for money. Ruth knew the explanation was incomplete. Lena saw it in her face. That night, Lena considered taking the file to Daniel. She imagined admitting that the story she had told about her mother was not entirely true. Daniel would not erase Marianne's failures. He would ask Lena to hold responsibility and compassion at the same time. Lena returned the folder to the locked drawer. From that point forward, ignorance could no longer protect her. She knew a history could become a sentence. She knew a person could be responsible for past harm and still be honest in the present. She knew a request for help could arrive after many failures and still be real. The file gave Lena a chance to change the way she saw every patient who reminded her of Marianne. Instead, she protected the worldview that had protected her from grief. The next time someone challenged her judgment, Lena would not be acting from an old misunderstanding alone. She would be choosing it. The county program changed Delaney Pharmacy before it changed Bellwether County. New forms arrived, along with grant money and more patients whose care depended on transportation schedules, clinic referrals, and approvals that passed through Lena's office. The program was designed to reduce isolation. Under Lena, it also concentrated authority. She decided which delivery routes received priority, which disputes required outside review, and which patients could wait for more information. On paper, every decision had a reason. In practice, Lena's private categories shaped how quickly she moved. Some people were cooperative. Some were careless. Some wanted help. Others, she believed, wanted permission to avoid responsibility. The difference lived in Lena's memory of their tone, missed appointments, and whether they had ever questioned her in front of others. Kira Bell saw the system from the inside. She had started as a nervous technician who apologized whenever she asked a question twice. Lena trained her patiently and encouraged her to study for a pharmacy degree. Kira wanted to become the kind of professional Lena had once seemed to be. Competent enough to protect people and calm enough not to make them feel small. At first, she interpreted Lena's stricter methods as experience. Rural medicine involved limited staff, long distances, and people arriving in crisis. Then Kira noticed the decisions were not equally difficult for everyone. Patients who thanked Lena received long explanations. Those who argued were told to return with more documentation. A mistake by someone Lena respected became an administrative problem. The same mistake by someone on her private list became evidence of character. Dr. Aaron Pell noticed the pattern too. He ran a small clinic serving several towns and had worked with Ruth for years. Pell knew some patients concealed information and that safety rules mattered. What concerned him was Lena's refusal to separate caution from punishment. When he asked her to transfer disputed cases for independent review, Lena reminded him that the county had chosen her to protect public resources. Pell said resources were not protected by making access depend on whether a patient had offended her. Lena ended the conversation. Myra Caldwell entered the conflict because of someone else. She was 51, worked in the county high school cafeteria, and often helped neighbors navigate forms. She was direct and not easily intimidated by professional titles. One afternoon, Myra accompanied an elderly neighbor to the pharmacy. The woman had misunderstood a notice and arrived without a required document. Lena explained that the request could not move forward. The neighbor became confused and apologized repeatedly. Myra asked whether another employee could contact the clinic before it closed. Lena heard the question as a challenge. She said exceptions were why programs failed. Myra replied that asking for clarification was not asking for an exception. Nothing dramatic happened. Lena did not shout. Myra did not threaten her. But the neighbor left crying, convinced she had done something dishonest. Myra returned the next day with the missing paperwork and a written complaint. It did not demand Lena's dismissal. It asked the county to require independent review when Lena had a personal conflict with a patient and to create a clearer appeal process. Ruth called the request reasonable. Lena called it a public accusation disguised as policy. She began reviewing Myra's history. She asked employees to document every disagreement, late arrival, and change in information connected to her. She said the county needed a complete record in case Myra attempted to misuse the program. Kira asked whether they did this for every complainant. Lena answered that responsible employees did not wait for a pattern to become dangerous. Ruth confronted her privately. She reminded Lena that the review requirement existed for exactly this situation. Lena said there was no conflict because she did not dislike Myra. She simply understood what Myra was trying to do. Ruth asked how Lena could know another person's motive before the process had begun. Lena replied that Ruth had spent too many years assuming good faith from people who used it against her. It was the first time Lena spoke to Ruth, as though kindness were a professional defect. The county board scheduled a public meeting. Daniel asked Lena to let Ruth handle it. Lena said silence would be interpreted as guilt. At the meeting, Myra described the elderly neighbor, the missing appeal process, and the fear patients felt when they believed disagreeing with Lena could affect future decisions. She did not know about Mary Ann. Still, her argument reached the place Lena had spent years protecting. Myra said, "No professional should turn a person's worst history into a permanent verdict." A man seated behind her added that Lena had become dangerous because she confused authority with character. Lena heard little after that. For an instant, she saw the resemblance between the adults who had judged Mary Ann and the system she now controlled. Then she rejected it. Mary Ann had lost control. Lena had earned it. Mary Ann had broken promises. Lena enforced them. By the time Lena stood to speak, she had transformed the accusation into proof that the program required her protection. She described fraud, manipulation, and the danger of allowing public pressure to replace standards. She never named Myra, but everyone understood whom she meant. Some board members praised Lena's commitment. Others approved a limited review process. The result taught her something dangerous. She could take a personal wound, translate it into professional language, and make others defend it as policy. After the meeting, Dr. Pell again offered to review cases involving Myra or anyone who had filed a complaint. Lena refused. He said the offer protected both patients and Lena. She answered that accepting it would reward intimidation. Kira began keeping her own notes, dates, instructions, and decisions that made her uneasy. Ruth had taught her that documentation was not betrayal when a professional choice placed someone at risk. Lena noticed Kira becoming quieter. Instead of asking why, she reduced Kira's access to certain files and reassigned part of her work. Kira understood the message. Questions had become disloyalty. At home, Daniel asked what Lena hoped to win. The board had not removed her. Myra had requested oversight, not revenge. Lena said that was how people like Myra began. First, they asked for review. Then they convinced everyone the person in charge could not be trusted. Daniel asked whether Lena could imagine any criticism being true. She told him he was beginning to sound like Ruth. The marriage did not end that night. But Daniel stopped trying to persuade Lena that everyone around her was not an enemy. He began considering what it meant to remain beside someone who needed agreement more than honesty. At the pharmacy, Lena's control became more precise. She requested one more verification, waited for one more callback, or insisted on one more confirmation. Each step could be defended alone. Together, they created a system in which patients Lena distrusted moved more slowly than everyone else. Lena told herself delay was caution, not harm. She mistook lowered voices for respect. The power did not arrive like a sudden corruption. It tasted like order. That was why Lena did not recognize how far she had moved until Myra Caldwell's name appeared in a case marked urgent, and the woman who had challenged her now needed the system Lena controlled. Ruth chose Sunday morning because the pharmacy was closed, and because she wanted Lena to enter the building without an audience. Daniel was already there when Lena arrived. Dr. Aaron Pell stood near the consultation room with a folder under one arm. None of them looked angry. That frightened Lena more than anger would have. Ruth began with the simplest fact. Myra Caldwell's complaint had created a conflict Lena could no longer dismiss. The county's review requirement had to be used. Dr. Pell would oversee all disputed cases, including Myra's. A relief pharmacist had agreed to cover the store. Lena would step away for 30 days. She would remain an owner. Her income would continue. No public announcement would describe the leave as discipline. If she completed an independent evaluation and counseling, she could return under shared oversight. Daniel had packed 2 bags and reserved a small rental outside the county. He said they could leave that afternoon. The plan did not take Lena's profession, home, or marriage. It protected all 3. Ruth told her the pharmacy could survive a month without her. The sentence landed like a threat, even though it was meant as reassurance. Lena looked at the keys in her hand. For years, those keys had represented proof that she had become someone no one could dismiss. Now, the people closest to her were saying the doors would still open if she disappeared. Dr. Pell explained that stepping aside was not an admission of guilt. It was what professionals did when their judgment might be affected by a personal conflict. Lena asked whether Myra had demanded this. Ruth said Myra did not know the meeting was happening. That answer removed the enemy Lena had prepared to fight. Daniel told her he was not asking her to abandon Bellwether County. He was asking her to stop using the county as a reason to abandon everyone else. For once, Lena did not argue. She went into her office and opened the locked drawer. The newspaper clipping was there, along with the private notes in Marianne's file. Lena lifted the file. A line from the intake form returned to her. Marianne had not wanted her children to remember her only at her worst. Lena had spent most of her life doing exactly that. She imagined showing the file to Ruth. She imagined telling Daniel that the story she had repeated for years was incomplete. Neither of them would excuse Marianne. Neither would excuse Lena. But they might stay. Lena placed the file in her bag. When she returned to the front room, she handed Ruth the pharmacy keys. "I'll go," she said. Daniel's relief was immediate but careful, as though sudden movement might cause Lena to change her mind. For several hours, the decision held. Lena went home, changed her clothes, and stood in the bedroom while Daniel loaded the car. She looked at the life they had built. Photographs never hung because she disliked crooked frames. Unopened paint samples. An empty room they had once discussed turning into a nursery. A life did not have to be perfect to remain available. Then Kira called. She said Myra Caldwell's name had appeared in an urgent case. Dr. Pell had already sent confirmation and requested that the matter be transferred to the relief pharmacist. The store's computer still listed Lena as the authorized program director, and Kira needed to know whether to complete the transfer. The correct answer required one word. Yes. Lena asked questions instead. Had every document been verified? Had Myra followed the previous instructions? Had the clinic used the proper channel? Kira said Dr. Pell had marked the matter urgent and would accept full responsibility. That should have ended the conversation. Instead, Lena heard the county meeting again. She remembered Myra describing patients who feared disagreeing with her. She remembered the word dangerous and the moment the board had considered limiting her authority. If Lena transferred the case immediately, Myra would receive exactly the oversight she had requested. To Lena, that felt less like professional procedure than surrender. She told Kira not to process anything until she arrived. Daniel was standing in the hallway when Lena ended the call. He asked whether someone else could handle it. Yes, Lena said. It was the first fully honest answer she had given all day. Daniel asked why she was going back. Lena said she needed to ensure the handoff was done correctly. They could still leave afterward. He looked at the bag containing Marianne's file. "You know what this is," he said. "This is the moment." Lena knew. She could give the phone to Daniel. She could call Ruth. She could allow Dr. Pell and the relief pharmacist to proceed. She could leave Bellwether County before pride became action. No one was forcing her toward the pharmacy. Lena went anyway. At the store, Kira had prepared the transfer documents. Dr. Pell's confirmation was attached. The instructions were clear. Lena read them twice. She did not reject the case outright. That would have made the personal nature of her decision too visible. She requested additional verification and suspended the transfer until it arrived. Kira reminded her that Dr. Pell had already accepted responsibility. Lena said urgency did not erase procedure. Kira answered that the requested verification was not normally required. The room became quiet. Lena could still stop. She saw fear in Kira's face, not fear of making a mistake, but fear of the person Lena had become when questioned. For a few seconds, shame broke through. Lena reached for the phone to call Dr. Pell. If she transferred the case now, the delay might remain only a delay. She could return the keys to Ruth and leave with Daniel. Then she imagined the call being documented. Dr. Pell would know she had intervened, despite agreeing to step away. Ruth would know Lena had kept control even after surrendering the keys. Daniel would know the promise had lasted only hours. Correcting the decision would also expose it. Lena lowered the phone. She told Kira to follow the new instructions and went into her office. Daniel called 3 times. Lena watched his name appear and disappear from the screen. She told herself she was protecting consistency. She told herself Myra's history mattered. She told herself another hour would not decide anything. But beneath every explanation was a simpler truth. Myra had challenged her, and Lena could not bear to become the person who helped her without resistance. On the desk sat the bag containing Marianne's file. Lena had carried the truth all the way to the edge of change. She left it unopened, while the urgent request waited outside. Myra Caldwell died before Lena found the courage to call Dr. Pell. By then, truth would have meant admitting that Lena had returned after agreeing to step away, interrupted a transfer another professional could handle, and allowed a personal conflict to shape an urgent decision. The news reached the store early the next morning. Kira stood behind the counter when Dr. Pell called. She watched Lena listen without speaking, one hand resting on the desk. After the call, Lena closed the office door. For several minutes, she did nothing. She did not search for an excuse. She sat with the knowledge that the warning had been real, and that she had recognized it before choosing not to act. Regret arrived without confusion. Lena knew. That was the last moment when the damage might still have remained one terrible decision followed by an honest confession. She opened the internal record instead. The first change was small. Lena added a note, saying the transfer information had been incomplete. Then she adjusted the timing of a phone call and described Kira's role in language that made it appear the technician had delayed forwarding the documents. Each sentence stayed close enough to a fact to sound defensible. Together, they created a lie. When Kira entered, Lena spoke gently. She said the county would investigate and that young employees were often blamed when records were unclear. She advised Kira to take several days away. Kira asked whether Lena had ordered the additional verification. Lena said everyone had been under pressure, and that memory could become unreliable after a death. The calmness of the answer made Kira understand how deliberate the rewriting had become. Lena was asking her to doubt the moment she had heard. Kira went home and opened the notebook she had kept since the county meeting. She had written the date, Dr. Pell's confirmation, Lena's return, and the exact request for additional verification. She also had a system record showing when the transfer had been ready. Ruth arrived before noon. Lena told her Myra's case had become confused during the change in leadership. She said Kira may have misunderstood the handoff. Ruth asked whether Lena had returned after surrendering the keys. Lena said she had only come back to ensure continuity. Ruth asked whether she had stopped the transfer. Lena said the records would explain everything. Ruth understood that Lena had chosen the records because she had already begun changing the story inside them. That evening, Daniel returned to the house. He placed the 2 packed bags in the hallway and asked one question. Did you know someone else could handle it? Lena said the situation was more complicated. Daniel repeated the question. She did not answer. He told her she had until morning to contact Ruth, Dr. Pell, and the county. He would sit beside her while she explained everything. He would not promise the marriage would survive, but he would help her tell the truth. Lena wanted to accept. She imagined the relief of no longer protecting each sentence with another sentence. She also imagined the newspaper, the board, and the patients who had called her strong. She asked Daniel to confirm that she had been home when Kira called. Lena said it would not be a complete lie. She had been home at the beginning. If the timeline looked less deliberate, the county might treat the case as procedural failure rather than retaliation. Daniel removed his wedding ring. He said he had spent years believing Lena's secrecy came from fear. Now he understood that fear had become something she used to recruit others into dishonesty. He left before midnight. Lena did not make the calls. Instead, she returned to the pharmacy before dawn and reviewed other disputed cases. If Myra's case stood alone, it could be examined closely. If Lena showed that she applied the same strict standards to everyone, she believed the decision might look like policy rather than vengeance. Samuel Pike's name appeared in one file. The retired teacher had complications in his care and needed coordination between the pharmacy and Dr. Pell's clinic. Samuel had once written that Lena understood what isolated families faced when help was far away. Now he was among the patients who had questioned delays. Lena could have transferred his case immediately. Instead, she applied the same extra requirements used with Myra. Samuel called and reminded her who he was. Not to demand special treatment, but because he believed Lena might not recognize his name. She recognized it. She told him everyone had to follow the same process. The words sounded fair. Their purpose was not. Samuel died before the investigation reached the pharmacy. Rachel Dunn, a home health aide enrolled in the county program, became caught in the same pattern soon afterward. She did not survive. Evelyn Hart's case also slowed, though Dr. Pell intervened in time to keep the delay from taking her life. The harm did not come from one dramatic command. It came from a professional who had learned how to make punishment resemble procedure. After Myra's death, Lena understood the stakes. After Samuel's warnings, she understood them again. With every repeated choice, uncertainty disappeared, and responsibility deepened. Kira returned with an attorney and handed Ruth copies of her notes. Dr. Pell provided his messages. The system preserved the original timing Lena had tried to blur. The county investigator no longer saw isolated mistakes. She saw a pattern. Lena stood in her office while Ruth opened the locked drawer. Inside were the private patient notes, the newspaper clipping, and Mary Ann's file. Ruth read enough to understand the final betrayal. Lena had known what it looked like when a person's past was used to discredit a present request for help. She had known because it happened to her mother. Myra's death did not create the point of no return by itself. That line was crossed afterward, when Lena recognized the consequence, selected an innocent person to carry the blame, and repeated the same judgment against others so the first decision would appear normal. By the time investigators sealed the pharmacy, Lena had turned every opportunity to tell the truth into another reason she believed she could not. By the time the case reached trial, Bellwether County no longer saw 4 separate medical tragedies. Investigators had reconstructed a pattern from Kira Bell's notes, Dr. Aaron Pell's messages, the pharmacy's original system records, and the versions Lena had edited afterward. The evidence did not depend on one witness or one disputed memory. It showed repeated choices. Lena had been warned that her judgment was compromised. She had agreed to step away. She had returned anyway. After Myra Caldwell died, Lena changed the story, placed suspicion on Kira, and continued imposing the same unnecessary barriers on Samuel Pike, Rachel Dunn, and Evelyn Hart. The defense argued that Lena had spent years trying to protect a county damaged by addiction and limited medical access. They described an exhausted pharmacist working inside an imperfect system. Those facts were true. They were also incomplete. The prosecution focused on the moments when Lena knew professional caution had become personal punishment and still chose to continue. Kira testified without dramatizing what happened. She explained the transfer prepared for Myra, Lena's return, and the instructions that did not match normal procedure. When asked why she kept notes, Kira looked toward Ruth. "Because she taught us that concern is not disloyalty," she said. Dr. Pell testified that he had offered to take responsibility for disputed cases more than once. Daniel described the night he gave Lena an opportunity to tell the truth and the moment she asked him to support a false timeline. Ruth provided Mary Ann's file. The document was not introduced to blame a dead woman for her daughter's crimes. It proved Lena understood how a troubled history could cause a present request to be dismissed. She had known. That knowledge became central to the court's judgment. The jury convicted Lena on multiple counts connected to the deaths of Myra Caldwell, Samuel Pike, and Rachel Dunn, the lasting harm suffered by Evelyn Hart, falsified records, and the attempt to place responsibility on Kira Bell. At sentencing, Daniel did not attend. His statement was read by an attorney. He wrote that Lena had not lost her marriage because Mary Ann suffered or because Bellwether County failed their family. She lost it because she repeatedly demanded that the people who loved her live inside a version of reality designed to protect her from responsibility. Lena was permitted to speak. She did not offer a long defense. She said she had believed control could prevent other families from ending like hers. Somewhere along the way, she admitted, she began treating disagreement as dishonesty and dependence as a moral defect. She said she was sorry. The judge acknowledged the statement but did not allow it to become the center of the hearing. He said Lena's childhood explained why certain wounds carried such force. It did not erase the decisions she made after recognizing those wounds were influencing her work. She had been offered supervision without humiliation, leave without financial ruin, treatment without public disgrace, and the support of people prepared to remain beside her. She rejected each path. The judge imposed a total sentence of 48 years in prison, with no possibility of review until Lena had served nearly 4 decades. Her pharmacy license was permanently revoked. Recoverable assets were directed toward restitution and civil claims. The sentence was not restoration. No number of years could return Myra, give Samuel another season in his garden, restore Rachel's place at her daughter's table, or remove the damage Evelyn would carry. It was a legal boundary placed around harm that could no longer be undone. Ruth spoke after the sentence. She did not describe Lena's talent, childhood, or lost potential. She read the names. Myra Caldwell had worked in a school cafeteria for 19 years and knew which children arrived hungry even when they claimed they had eaten. Samuel Pike had taught science, written scholarship letters for students with no family connections, and grown more tomatoes than he could use. Rachel Dunn had cared for her older sister and was saving for a trip to the Atlantic coast because she had never seen the ocean. Evelyn Hart was still alive. She sat in the courtroom with a cane and corrected anyone who referred to her only as the survivor. She was a seamstress, a church treasurer, and a woman who still disliked being late. Kira Bell's name was included too. She had not died, but Lena's lie had nearly taken her profession, freedom, and trust in her own memory. After the trial, the pharmacy was sold through a community trust. Ruth helped reopen it as part of a small health center with shared authority, mandatory outside review, and a patient appeal process. Kira returned to school. For months, she considered leaving pharmacy altogether. In the end, she decided Lena would not be allowed to define what the profession meant. She completed her degree and later worked under rules that treated questions as part of safety rather than betrayal. Caleb came back to Bellwether County one final time. He replaced Marianne's damaged grave marker with a simple stone. It did not call her innocent. It did not reduce her to addiction. Below her name, Caleb added one line. She asked to come back. Years into Lena's sentence, a prison interviewer asked when she understood what she had become. Lena did not name the trial or the first day in custody. She said it was the moment she learned someone else could help Myra and went back to the pharmacy anyway. Understanding arrived before the crime was complete. That was why regret could not release her from it. Lena had spent her life believing mercy became dangerous when given without control. In the end, Bellwether County remembered the people who paid for that belief, not as cases, not as warnings, as names.